Making this one change can skyrocket your GPA and help you get a 4.0 regardless of what your GPA is now. And it's what I use to get consistent 4.0s in college. During my first 2 years of college, the way I would study was by rereading my notes, rewatching the lecture or reviewing the lecture slides, and doing practice questions. But during the first 2 years of college, that didn't lead to an amazing GPA. I certainly didn't have a 4.0, and I was studying so long and so much more, and I knew I could perform so much better. It wasn't until I realized that my roommate was studying half as much as me and getting straight A's that I wanted to understand what he was doing, and I really knew that I needed to change the way I was studying. So I pretty much stole his study techniques, and I immediately began studying less and getting straight A's. And it all came down to one thing: active recall and spaced repetition. It sounds like two pretty mysterious things, but really it's just one thing, and I'll explain it to you now. So what I mean by active recall and spaced repetition is active recall is just a learning strategy that involves actively stimulating your memory during the learning process instead of passively reviewing notes or textbooks or lecture slides. It's essentially you just actively testing yourself on the material that you're trying to learn. And active recall has proven to be the most effective way to study for a few reasons. First, it forces deep processing. Active recall requires you to actively retrieve information from your memory, which forces you and your brain to engage in deep processing that helps create strong neural connections, making it easier to recall the information later. Secondly, it emphasizes retrieval practice. The act of recalling information is itself a form of practice. Just like a muscle gets stronger with exercise, your memory becomes better at retrieving information with more practice and more repetitions. On the other hand, spaced repetition is also kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's a study strategy where you revisit the same information multiple times, but on different days and ideally at increasing intervals of time. This optimizes your memory retention over time and stores information, instead of being in the short-term memory, into long-term memory. So all that may sound like a lot, but let's discuss how you can implement active recall in your study routine so you can start leveraging this strategy that's been proven to be super effective. But before we dive into that, if you're finding this video helpful, give it a like and subscribe for more pre-dental videos that can help you on your path of getting accepted into dental school. So the first way to leverage active recall is through flashcards. Flashcards are a classic tool for active recall, and I'd consider them the most underrated study tool. When I started using flashcards, I began studying less and performing way better on my exams, and I'd create flashcards with questions on one side and answers on the other. And that makes it so you force yourself to quiz yourself on a regular basis to use that active recall and to recall different facts and concepts and definitions instead of just passively rereading notes or lecture slides and then kind of nodding and saying that makes sense and moving on to the next thing, which is what I was guilty of. The second way is through using the 10-24-7 rule. The 10-24-7 rule is a study schedule that leverages active recall. It essentially focuses on you reviewing the material you learned 10 minutes after learning it. So pretty much after the lecture, you'd go to the library and then you'd review your notes and the material you were just taught. You'd listen to the lecture again, fill in your notes, fill in the gaps, and just re-review everything. The 24 is for 24 hours later. So 24 hours later, you study the material again. And usually this time you're gonna do something that's a lot more involved and more in depth. So for example, this is where you can be creating flashcards, summarizing key points, discussing the material with your friends, going to office hours, or even trying to teach the material to someone else in your class. And this second review helps solidify your memory and understanding of the content. The 7 in 10-24-7 is 7 days later. So 7 days after learning the material for the first time, you want to review the material once more. This can involve going over your notes, but remember, don't keep things passive, keep them active. So test yourself with practice questions, go through more flashcards, quiz a friend, or teach the material to someone else. And this spaced repetition is gonna really reinforce your long-term memory and ensure that you don't forget material over time, from the time you learn it to the time of your exam. The third way to implement this is through practice quizzes. So take practice quizzes or go through practice problems related to your course and answer them without referring to your notes or textbooks. And make sure to not only review the questions you got wrong, but also rereading the textbook to learn more about the concept that you got wrong, so that anything about that concept or topic does not trick you again or comes back up on the midterm exam or your final exam and then gets you and dings you points. So active recall is the most effective study technique that can significantly boost your memory retention and comprehension of your course material. By actively engaging with the material through methods like flashcards, the 10-24/7 rule, and practice quizzes, you'll be better prepared for your exams and have a much deeper understanding of the subject material. So give active recall a try, watch your academic performance soar, and watch this next video on other tips to getting a 4.0 GPA.